business as usual for Joe Shane, right? I mean, we used to see him at Ranger games with Brian Dable. We used to see them going out all the time and, laughing and taking good photos together, But maybe it was all smoke after all. Maybe it was like, when you're in a relationship and it's those early months and then it reaches its peak and then kind of like, I don't know if I'm meant to be like best friends with this person or not. And then the business sort of gets into the way. But so far this week, Joe Shane has continued to operate normally. Um, the Giants signed kicker Ben Sauls and tight end Zach Davidson to the practice squad this week. Davidson, a former Buffalo Bill, shocker, and Ben Sauls is a UDFA. We know Graham Gano is headed back to injured reserve with a neck issue. And that's another reason why I think Dable got let go. There's just so many reasons at once. And yeah, you could blame Joe Shane for this as well. The inability to replace Graham Gano. I mean, this is year 4 with Graham Gano. He's been on the team since the start of the Joe Judge era. And he's 38 years old. He's been injury prone, not just this year, not just last year, each of the last 3 seasons. Holy smokes, guys. He cannot be this kicker anymore. Jude McAtomney was not the answer either. He's an international player. I think they jumped him up too soon. He's still getting used to the NFL game. He kind of got a bad rap for those missed kicks in the Denver game. He's more of a practice squad guy anyway. Younghoe Koo, I mean, he's real shaky. He can't hit anything past like 40, 45 yards anymore. So Ben Sauls, this could be his job. In fact, when Brady, his mom liked my post when I put out on Twitter that Giants signed Ben Sauls to the practice squad. So we'll see. 24-year-old kicker, 4th kicker this season on the Giants roster. He has never kicked in a regular season game. And then for Zach Davidson, he is a 2021 5th-round pick by the Minnesota Vikings, spent the last 3 years with the Bills, 6'7", 251, had 1 catch last year in 3 games played. I mentioned Graham Gano heads to IR, and then the Giants also worked out 4 players. Trace Ford, who is with the team during the offseason, safety Micah Abernathy, Tysheem Johnson, another safety, and cornerback Miles Purchase. Now, the big news of the week, and this is where I want to get your expertise, is Jameis Winston being named QB1 for Week 11. And I watched his press conference yesterday, Brady, and he was singing, he was feeling himself, he was having a grand old time. He's the 3rd quarterback to start a game for the Giants this season, 10th year in the league at 31 years old, and he's used his experience to impress the coaching staff, being a leader, and his positive energy to help uplift his teammates. And ultimately, I think Kafka, a change of guard at head coach, a change of guard at quarterback. It's not necessarily Dart. Let me be clear. It's Dart's job. When he clears concussion protocol, he will be the starter. But Winston is above Russ at this point. And about you, Brady, I mean, you kind of alluded to it before. I think it's the correct move, and I am not expecting to beat the Packers this weekend, but we know what he can bring to the table, and now it'll at least be an exciting game. If it was Russ starting, I'd have the game on, but I'd be busy doing other stuff in the background. I would not give a rat's ass, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree. Jameis on the field, off the field, he's an easy guy to root for, whether he's a Giant or not. But I remember them signing him and Russ and drafting Dart, and it was like, well, they might not win a whole lot of games, but at least the QB room will be fun to watch. But finally seeing Jameis get the start, and he impressed in preseason as well. I mean, Dart was phenomenal. Russ, looked like Russ. He was good, and he had a few like bad interceptions. Jameis had 1 or 2 as well, but I don't really know what to expect. Kind of like you, not really a win. But the Packers have been shaky, and Jameis, he can throw for a lot of yards. He could throw a lot of touchdowns, interceptions. I really, it's hard to like get a prediction on this game for him, other than we are still the Giants with a new coach now playing the Packers. But I think I almost from the beginning, or at least when Dart took over, I kind of was almost done with Russ. Like, not saying like cut him per se, because he's still a good veteran presence, and we have seen, a few years ago, Daniel Jones would get hurt, and then Tyrod Taylor would come in and like get hurt in the same game, and you'd have Saquon running like wildcat plays for like a quarter until
was
one of
that game
came back.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think like Jameis, he's a little bit younger, and I just think at this point, Russ is a little. Not that Jameis is like the most agile guy, but Russ is kind of a statue back there where I feel like Jameis, still has a little bit more talent on his side. So I'm definitely excited. We also, I don't know if you mentioned the Hodgins signing today. 2022 hero Isaiah Hodgins back with the team. So I remember seeing him on like the practice squads earlier this season. I'm like, they should bring him back. He was one of the best players, a huge reason why the Giants got to where they were. Obviously not like a superstar per se, but it's fun to see him back. And I mean, once again, you'd rather the team be good, but at least like Jameis is so fun to watch. You have Hodgins back. There is some hope for the future with – it's not like half of these games are just blowouts. Like a lot of them they've either should have won or at least are hanging around in. So there's definitely a lot of hope with this team, and I can't help but be excited to kind of watch the game this Sunday. I'm not really expecting a win, but kind of like you said, the interim head coach, a lot of times you see like the team like really take that into their next game and maybe pull off a big upset or at least, take the Packers right down to the wire. So we'll have to see, but this team is very slowly, I feel like, trending upwards. But I definitely feel like the quarterback decision with Dart out was certainly the right move with Jameis.
Yeah, and I think this perfectly leads into the next point as far as Hodgins goes. This is why Joe Shane should not be 100% safe, because we're happy about getting Isaiah Hodgins back. That says we have not done enough to address the wide receiver position.
Oh, yeah.
Jalen Hyatt is an inactive every single week. He doesn't play. Gunnar Olszewski gets more reps than Jalen Hyatt. In fact, Gunnar has a touchdown. So no Gunnar slander tolerated. And they lost little Jordan Humphrey off waivers to the Broncos. That's the risk of keeping a guy like that on the practice squad. And why was Humphrey still on the practice squad, and why was Hyatt on the 53? Why can't they just cut Hyatt? Why? Like, he is useless. Daboll's gone. Daboll's the one who executed that trade up for him. Why is he still around? Why is Evan Neal wasting a roster spot at this juncture? He's on the injury report this week, Brady?
No, I had no idea.
Did you know that?
No.
He is on the injury report with a hamstring. He did not practice today with a hamstring injury. How the hell do you get a hamstring injury when you haven't played a single snap all season? In fact, you haven't dressed all season.
I really don't understand it. Between that and like Hyatt, like I know there's the thing that it's like, oh, like, our regime drafted him, but it's like you don't utilize him. And it's like, oh, well, you put him in for a few plays, his speed and all that, but like they don't even use that like for like a decoy. He just dresses and takes up a roster spot along with Evan Neal, who I thought they were gonna try to move to guard. I guess that didn't really work. They worked him out in the preseason, and then I really don't know why these guys are still on the team.
Yeah, they should just cut Azudu too off of IR. I don't know why they have him on injured reserve to return. That was another bad draft pick by the Giants. That was the first red flag of the Joe Shane era for me, drafting him in the third round, by the way. Now, I will say this. I think he's gotten better at his job over the first 4 years, but we're not where we want to be. We're in a good, clean salary cap space because we've let a lot of talent walk away. And we still have restrictions. There was no way we were trading for a receiver at the trade deadline because we were financially handicapped, because the Giants, they had to overpay for Paulson Debo because they missed on Deontay Banks' draft pick. They had to overpay for not Tyler Newman, Javon Holland, They let Jason Pinnock go in free agency, who would have been a much cheaper option. Now, yes, Holland is an upgrade over Pinnock, but it's just moves like that get me mad. Now, let's get into the meat of this Packers game, Brady. I could sit here and talk about Joe Shane forever, man. It's been a long 4 years with him at the helm, and we'll see. Right now, it looks like he's safe and he'll be leading the search for the next head coach. But anyway, Packers are favored by a touchdown, 7.5 officially. However, the Giants have won the last 2 meetings. Before the win against the Eagles this year, I think the best feeling as a Giants fan was that Monday Night Football win back in 2023 against Green Bay with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. And the Packers have not beaten the Giants since 2019. So it's been 6 seasons. And the most important factor here that I think the Giants could use to the advantage is Green Bay does not have their leading pass catcher anymore. Tight end Tucker Kraft is out for the season with a torn ACL. So they're waiting for that new number 1 passing target to emerge. It might be Romeo Doubs. Christian Watson is back healthy. They targeted Dontavion Wicks 10 times last week. But they need to figure it out quick because they are on a 2-game losing streak. They've scored under 14 points in back-to-back games. A tough loss on Monday Night Football to the Philadelphia Eagles, Brady. Quickly here, I mean, just how do you game plan for this if you're the Giants? I mean, Green Bay, yeah, their offensive struggles, but defensively, too, they're going to show up. X is going to show up. It's an Xavier McKinney revenge game. How do you game plan for him and this Packers offense? There's a lot that could go into this here, but I just feel like this team hasn't mentally recovered yet from the Daboll firing, and they're trying to prepare for this game, and I just don't know how this is going to pan out.
Yeah, and that's kind of the risk you take with the midseason firing of like a head coach. Like, sure, you could get that one game, like, sparks the team, but like there's so much going on too with your quarterback's injured and all that. And in the middle of the week, now you got to transition to, keep playing games. You still got a little less than half a season left. And at the very least, go out there, try to play spoiler for a team that, as you said, lost their best pass catcher. They're struggling mightily on offense. They've already lost to Cleveland and Carolina in like games where they've held the opponent. The defense held the opponent to minimal points, and the offense just couldn't do much themselves. So I'm sure they'll find their number 1 guy this week against this defense and secondary, who maybe not so much the secondary, but the defense coming into the season, specifically the pass rush, who last game wasn't even terrible. They just couldn't get Williams on the ground, and when they did, there was a penalty in the secondary. But yeah, McKinney, Parsons isn't hurt, right? He's playing as far as I saw, I think. Like, he doesn't have an injury, I don't think. Micah Parsons. Yeah, so you got, I mean, you get their defense is still extremely good. Like I said, despite those losses to teams they probably should beat, they're holding a lot of teams to minimal points, including the Eagles last Monday. The Eagles are a great defense, and the Packers just couldn't score. So for the Packers, it almost feels like a get-right game against a team that's not great, can compete, but also now in coaching turmoil in the middle of the season. Like, how's that going to affect their confidence at all? But also, like, for the Packers team that's really struggling, it could also be a possible trap game for them. A Giants team maybe rejuvenated a little bit from a change of scenery in the locker room and a new quarterback in Jameis Winston, which we saw that last Packers game on Monday night a few years ago. Tommy DeVito kind of just started to become the guy, I guess, for a few games, and they kind of rode off the Tommy Cutlets energy and pulled off that upset. And it's certainly possible that it could happen again, but don't have my hopes too high. But the Packers are certainly a team right now that they got to start winning, because the Bears, they shouldn't have won last week. And you could argue maybe they're overachieving slightly, but the Bears are looking pretty good. The Vikings are like hanging around 500, like, and then of course the Lions. So like their division and the NFC is a complete gauntlet. And about a year or two ago, we were talking about this team being Super Bowl contenders for the next, couple seasons potentially, and that hasn't really panned out that much.
Mm-hmm.
And this season, they could be in trouble, and this is a massive game for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Giants could play that spoiler role this week. Green Bay is on the down right now. So, I mean, how do we contain Jordan Love in this Packers offense? For me, I think it's pressuring him. You got Brian Burns, a guy who has 11 sacks, despite the lackluster scheme where there's no creativeness and there's no, there's just no disguised blitzes or anything. They don't have the elements to really catch quarterbacks off guard. I think Burns is that one guy that could really do a good job at rushing the passer, taking on double teams. They did not sack Caleb Williams last week. I know they had a couple nullified by penalty, but they allowed him to run for 63 yards. They have to finish plays and get sacks. And in 2 of the 3 Packers losses this season, Jordan Love has been sacked 3 or more times. So for you, Brady, I mean, what's the key specifically to slowing down Jordan Love?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think pressuring him is massive, and we kind of seen in these games, kind of like last week too, when the pocket starts to collapse or he's forced to move it a little bit. He's not as great. You give him time, and he'll certainly hurt you. He's maybe not one of those top quarterbacks in the league, but he's certainly shown that he can be the guy for Green Bay. But if this Giants pass rush, this vaunted pass rush, at least what should be, hasn't always been, can get pressure on them, even if they don't bring him to the ground every time, but can force him into some mistakes or some bad passes and completions. But they got to try to get pressure too, because the longer they kind of let Love escape, that could be trouble for our beaten up secondary, or not to mention they could take penalties, and even if we do get the sack like last week, could kind of nullify that. But there's been a lot of noise too about Dexter Lawrence. Obviously, he's had to deal with a lot of double teams, maybe even triple teams the last few seasons, but he's still been so good. And this year his numbers aren't quite there. He did have a sack canceled out last week. Abdul Carter has been great. Not all of like the stats, like the sacks and all that, are necessarily there, but I think this is really a potential game for him to really kind of stamp his presence in the league. And then hopefully Kayvon Thibodeau can set an edge this week maybe, and not allow the running backs or the receivers to get to the outside of him, the tight ends, because I feel like he certainly struggles with that. But I think there's so much potential for this defense this week. I'm not going in with huge expectations over the last several weeks, really. Since that fourth quarter, they were borderline great, other than kind of the end of the Dallas game. But for much of the season, in the fourth quarter, some like switch kind of just flipped in that Denver game, and they obviously played a huge part in blowing that game. And they really just have not been the same since, other than Brian Burns. It feels like he's showing up each and every week. But I feel like this is almost maybe a get right game for them, in the sense that if they can get that pressure, I certainly think Jordan Love, with a lot of kind of injuries, most notably Kraft to his weaponry, could be forced into a few mistakes.
Certainly. Love can be inaccurate at times, especially when under pressure. For me, though, specifically, I think it starts with stopping the run, right? And more containing the run, because the Giants have the worst run defense in football under Shane Bowen. Crazy how he's still employed. I know I said that earlier. I'll say it again. Obviously, the Giants are going to have to do something differently. You have a top running back like Josh Jacobs against the Giants' run defense that is surrendering 5.5 yards per carry. Last week, they gave up 171 yards and 2 scores. And Josh Jacobs is a guy who could pound the rock into the end zone. A touchdown in 6 straight games, 8 of his last 9. How does Big Blue contain him? Because obviously without Micah McFadden, I feel like it's going to be very, very difficult. And Green Bay, they have good under-the-radar offensive linemen. You got Sean Ryan at center, guy that we both know very well, Aaron Banks. They signed this offseason to play left guard for them. And then Jordan Morgan, who has done a nice job transitioning from tackle to guard upon entering the NFL. So their interior offensive line, Dexter Lawrence has been quiet this year. I think for me, Jordan Love doesn't even have to do that much for them to win this football game. I mean, I think it's won in the trenches, to be honest with you, and it's hard for me to see them containing Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I do agree with that also. Like the passing game, obviously, we talked about containing that, but it really does honestly start with Josh Jacobs in that backfield for Green Bay. And one of the better backs, I feel like, this season against one of the worst overall defenses and basically the worst, as you said, run defense. But the potential on paper is there with, Dexter Lawrence, Raheem Nunez-Roches, I feel like has made some more plays this season when he's kind of been in the game. And of course we know about all those other guys, but I do agree that McFadden injury really was a killer to the linebacker position. Bobby Okereke's first season here, he was making tackles left and right. And not to say he's has been bad per se, but he's certainly kind of been like Dexter Lawrence this season, where he's a bit quiet. He's missed a few tackles as well. So I'm really going to start in the trenches and even that second level. Even when he might, get through kind of that initial hole, can the next guy bring him down? Because once again this season, it seems like missed tackles have certainly been an issue with the Giants as well.
Yeah, that's well put. For me, a couple other keys, obviously protecting the football. McKinney has 2 picks on the year. Giants have a -4 turnover ratio. I think us too, establishing the run, right? I mean, you look at on the flip, their run defense is solid. They have a top 5 run defense in the NFL. They allow under 4 yards per carry. They held Barkley to under 3 yards per carry last week, 60 total. And then last week against Chicago, the Giants did better when they were given opportunity, right? I think Tyrone Tracy had a good game, 14 rushes for 71 yards. That was a season high for him. But the number one is, I think it's protecting Jameis on the offensive side of the ball. Thomas and Illuminor will do their thing. Rashawn Gary's a little scary, and then you got Micah Parsons, but they don't have too much on the interior as far as pass rushing goes. The Packers have allowed the 7th fewest passing yards in the NFL, and a large part of that is they are getting pressure on the edges. Brady, is there anything else that stands out to you as far as keys for the Giants keeping this close down the stretch?
I do think protecting Jameis, because while I kind of mentioned he's a little bit more mobile than Russ, he's not the fastest or most agile guy, and obviously you just want to limit sacks and potentially even worse than that. Jameis is a guy that likes to air it out. The addition of Hodgins is great. Obviously, our receiving core is still not the greatest though. But Jameis certainly a guy that likes to push the ball down the field. Obviously, the Packers have a solid secondary. We mentioned, of course, McKinney as well. You got to be careful. I'm not saying that their game plan should just be even though Jameis might still do this, just shucking it, hoping one of his guys could come down with it, because that can lead to, one of his patented 3 interception games, although it could also end up with 300 yards. But I definitely think protecting Jameis, even some quick throws, trying to get some guys out in space. Wan'Dale's kind of had an underrated season. I feel like he's he's a quick little shifty slot guy too that can maybe make a catch in a little bit of space and break a couple tackles or find some room. Darius Slayton had a great game last week. There were some catches that I was stunned, because usually there's catches he should make that he doesn't. You never know what you're going to get when the ball comes his way, but I certainly think the passing game offensively is important. I think the running game, last week, they didn't do much in the first half, and then they kind of adjusted, and their second half running game played a big part in at least putting them in a position to perhaps win that game. But I certainly, obviously, the Scadaboo loss has been really tough for this team over the last few weeks, because he just puts his head down and finds yardage. But Tracy's still been great, and he's probably a bit more shifty as well. But But as you mentioned, like I think more so the passing game offensively with the maybe a little bit more lack of pass rushing up the middle. And who knows if you could kind of open that up a little bit. Don't want to do what Dable did with Dart, but can find maybe Jameis kind of scrambling for a couple QB runs. Hopefully he slides and doesn't take too many hits. But I certainly think that the potential is there for an upset. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think this game could be closer than maybe a few weeks ago we a lot of people would have thought.
I agree. And quickly here, we'll go over 2 players to watch for each team. I know you talked about Wandale, but he's one guy that I do want to mention. Leads the team with 602 receiving yards and 53 catches, 2 touchdowns to go with that. He leads the team in receptions, but the next closest player has 20 less receptions. That's how much of a volume player he is. 6 catches or more in 5 of his last 6 games. I mean, I think he is going to be key in this game going up against Packers nickelback Javon Bullard. And then defensively, I think Paulson Adebo, the Giants are expected to get him back this week. 4 passes defended on the year. He hasn't played since week 7 in the Philly game where he got a little bit banged up. And then obviously Jameis too is a little honorable mention. I mean, 4th team Winston has started a game 4 last year, 13 touchdowns, 12 picks with the Browns and 7 starts, 12 games played, 2-5 record. So, there is some recognition there for Jameis. And all in all, I think with Green Bay, with holding their opponents to under 14 points in back-to-back games, I think if you're able to get the ball out quick and early, I think Winston might be able to get the Giants above 14 points this week. I know that's not saying much, but based off of how the Packers defense has played, that's an accomplishment. And for Green Bay here, the 2 that I have, obviously Xavier McKinney. The Packers defense has only forced 6 turnovers all season long, and they need to find a way for him to make plays. He leads the team with 2 interceptions. They're good at getting sacks, not great at causing turnovers. And then on offense for Green Bay, I had a tough time deciding between Romeo Doubs and Josh Jacobs, but I ultimately went with Josh Jacobs. The Giants just can't stop the run. It's the same game plan every week, 5.5 yards per carry. He's got over 230 receiving yards as well, and he ranks 2nd in the NFL with 11 touchdowns. So all in all, I think those are my 2. And then, we can talk about Love, how he likes his tight ends with Luke Musgrave, getting him more involved in Tucker Kraft's absence. But ultimately, Jacobs and McKinney are the 2 that I think could be potential game changers on Sunday. Brady, how about you? 2 for each team.
Yeah, I'll start with the Giants offensively. I'm going to go with Theo Johnson. We kind of talked about the tight ends a little bit. Theo's kind of had an interesting, I guess, career here, specifically this season. He's had some passes right in his hands that he's dropped. He's also made some great catches, and last week he had himself a pretty kind of, I guess, underrated game in the grand scheme of things. And I feel like the Giants are certainly a team that try to utilize their tight ends in the passing game as much as possible, especially with their receiving core kind of being what it is this year, especially with Neighbors going down. So I think certainly in the passing game, especially, they're going to want to get their tight ends, especially Johnson, more involved, and also just the tight ends, I guess, in general, might need to block extra better this week against guys like Parsons and all those guys coming off the edge specifically. Defensively, I'm going to go with Abdul Carter. So it's kind of been a weird rookie season because you look at some of like the main stats like sacks and all that, and even just watching a lot of the games, like you can almost get a little quiet at times, but he's still probably one of the front runners for Defensive Player of the Year, and he's still making a lot of noise despite maybe not always getting home or not always making like the explosive defensive play. But I think this is an opportunity for him this week. We talked about getting pressure. Obviously, Green Bay is a pretty decent line, but almost like a fresh start for this team. I think the young rookie really has potential this week, especially with Thibodeau and Burns kind of getting a large load of the reps being here for a few seasons now. I think Carter can kind of fit in nicely. I think the scheme this week, we'll see what Bowen does, but I think it could be favorable for him. And then on the other side, Green Bay, you mentioned Jacobs. I'll go with Dobbs because the pass defense of the Giants coming into the season didn't really expect all that much. But if Adebo comes back this week, that could be huge. I expect him to maybe line up against Dobbs for as much as the Giants can, because if Banks is that guy, then we could be in major trouble.
It.
Debo, I think, is huge, but Dobbs is a guy that, he's shifty, plays on the outside a lot too. So if they can limit him, they still have several other weapons, but I feel like, especially with Kraft going down, might be Love's number one guy. Even if the last few weeks it hasn't completely looked that way, but I'm sure Love's going to try to get him involved as much as possible. So hopefully the secondary can lock him down as much as possible. And then probably the obvious pick defensively, Micah Parsons. Love it if he'd go up against Thomas as much as possible, because that would certainly stunt his defensive production. But it wouldn't surprise me if he goes on the other side against, say, a Luminor, who has had kind of his off moments this season, but stopping him is obviously one of the most important things as far as one particular Green Bay defensive player and really in the whole NFL. It's nice to get him out of the division. Of course, we still have to play him this year, but I think if they can block him well enough, block kind of the offensive line could do well enough as a whole, give Jameis time, I think the Giants, might have a shot in this game, because I think part of the reason why Jameis's stats are so wacky, especially with the interceptions sometimes, especially like played for the Browns last year, he was a little bit rushed, and if the Giants offensive line can hold their own against a top pass rushing unit, I think they'll certainly give themselves a shot at least.
Oh, no, absolutely. And then a couple other key players for the Packers, too. We can't forget about Quay Walker. That's another guy who's a really good football player, great linebacker out of Georgia, leads the team with 77 tackles. And then Christian Watson, a big play machine. You mentioned Parsons, and then Rashawn Gary, who's actually their sack leader with 7.5. But Brady, quickly here, before we pick the game, take a player from the Packers and put them on the Giants. So steal somebody.
So my first thought was Micah Parsons, but when you think about the Giants are they don't necessarily need him, at least on paper.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, honestly, this might be not like the best pick because we've seen him on the Giants, but right now I think Xavier McKinney would be a pretty easy choice. He was one of my favorite Giants when he was here.
Mm-hmm.
Now goes to Green Bay, had a great season last year, off to a pretty good first half so far this year. And the Giants have struggled pretty mightily in the passing game. Getting a Debo back's great. Hollins has been pretty solid, but you got Banks on the other side and all that. So I think him, if you want to go with a non-Giants player, non-former Giant, probably Romeo Doubs, just someone in the passing game, with the struggles of the receiving core.
No, absolutely. For me, you took the guy I was going to take. I was going to take Romeo Doubs because obviously we are decimated in the pass catching game. And most importantly, when you have a quarterback, whether it's Dart or it's Winston, you need to make big plays in the pass game. Doubs has 7 big play catches. He's currently their new number 1 pass catcher after losing Tucker Kraft, and he has 35 catches for 446 yards and 4 scores. So not too shabby, if you ask me. I would throw him on the Giants in a heartbeat. Again, they have a good football team, and it's a young football team. Keshawn Nixon, 12 passes defended. You could argue, you could take one of their corners, right? Carrington Valentine, Javon Bullard, guys who are under the radar type of guys that, are significant upgrades. And Goofball saying, what's up, Goofballs, by the way? How about instead of a player, we steal a coach? I will take LaFleur or Hafley. How about Chris Shula? That's a guy I've had my eye on a little bit. Rams DC. He's been on McVay's coaching staff since 2017, and pretty much every coach to lead McVay has had success. I mean, Kevin O'Connell, say what you want about Zach Taylor, but he did get them to a Super Bowl. Liam Cohn, Matt LaFleur, guys like that, I think Chris Shula could be worth a shot. And we know who his grandfather is, and we know his uncle, former Giants OC Mike Shula. So there could be something there. Just a dark horse that I don't think enough people are talking about. But that's more for another show. Quickly here, Green Bay, pretty healthy team, 11 weeks into the season. All guys are banged up a little bit. Nate Hobbs, the only guy for them who did not practice. However, Brady, let's go over ours quick before we pick this game. Jackson Dart, not practicing this week in concussion protocol. Chauncey Golston hasn't played in like 5 weeks. Neck injury. Graham Gano, IR. Evan Neal, for some reason, hamstring. Tyler Nubin, neck. Ugh, he has been a huge disappointment, by the way. Nacho with a toe. Bobby Okereke with the shoulder. Kayvon Thibodeau with the shoulder, did not practice. Darius Slayton with the hamstring, again, did not practice. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Brady, as the guest, you can pick first. Who do you think wins, and what is your final score?
Jeez. On top of not winning games, it seems like every year they can't stay healthy. Yeah. So, I feel like I've said it a bunch of times. I think this game could be a bit closer than maybe a few weeks ago, thinking, oh boy, we got the Packers. I do think this team will be a bit rejuvenated with kind of the new kind of coaching change. Jameis always brings a lot of energy. Don't really know what to expect from him. I think the defense shows up a little bit more this week and stifles the Packers offense enough. In the end, though, I do think the Packers get back on track. I do think it's going to be maybe a little bit more low scoring than some of the Giants games where, like, last year they'd only put up 6 points a game, and this year they're losing like 38-33 or something like that. But I'm going to say that the Packers hold on by about a score. I'm going to go 23-17 Green Bay.
All right, I'm going 24-14 Green Bay. I think we're the perfect defense, unfortunately, right now for their offense to get back on track because of our inability to stop the run. So that's where I'm going at there. Kafka loses his first game as interim head coach, and the Giants drop to 2-9 on the season with Brian Daboll enjoying some pizza and laughing at his TV screen. That is where I am at. We'll see, though. I think the future is bright for this football team. Just another injury-plagued season, not enough depth, poor personnel, and hopefully with another draft or two, Joe Shane can try to get this right. If he does remain the GM, we'll left to be seen what happens at the end of the season with him. But right now, last 2 drafts, I think he's done well. And Brady, thank you for joining tonight. I appreciate your time. And as a way of saying thank you, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm currently in the sports broadcasting world, working production assistant for MSG, also play-by-play and production for LI Sports Network. And I have 2 Instagrams. Just kind of like my main personal one, Brady Campbell 1308. But I also, as of like last week or so, created my more, I guess, professional Instagram. So it's my last name, Campbell, CAMPBELL, on the call, like calling sports games. All basically like one word, no spaces or anything like that. But yeah, that's where I am, mainly on Instagram. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm also on LinkedIn, I guess, if anyone out there in the sports broadcasting world or anything wants to connect. Brady Campbell. But yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you having me on to talk some Giants in a very tumultuous week and season.
Absolutely. Continue to grow the Giants fan community. Collaborating with each other all the time is great, regardless of who it is. And you are definitely a great guest to have on the show. So thank you, Brady. I appreciate that. Folks, we appreciate you all tuning in tonight as well. Make sure to go check us out below on all of our social media handles. He's Brady Campbell. I am Tom Scavetta, wishing you all an excellent evening. Love one another. And without further ado, let's go Big Blue.